Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello. Are you guys ready for another rock star panel? Yes? It's our last panel of the day. And I honestly thought, I thought this was going to be the most difficult panel to put together, because when we all got together to figure out how do we frame health equity in a day, and what panels do we have, we said, okay, women's health and designing for the inclusive making inclusive design the gold standard. And then we said we also have to demonstrate that this isn't just about doing the right thing. Not that should be what we should be doing, and it's not philanthropy, it's not just good for the soul, it is good for business. It is an ROI. But we needed to find, and we're like, yeah, let's have a panel around that. But then we were like, oh God, now we got to go find the people that can tell that story. And you know what? I thought that was going to be very difficult. And I don't know, it felt like this fell together in a matter of like a week or something. It's the power of the network here in this room. So I think we can surmise that better healthcare access equals an attractive ROI. But the mission today is to show this. So according to a new Deloitte report, America will pay a staggering $1 trillion for its barriers to healthcare access by 2040. The U.S. healthcare system is facing significant hurdles such as staffing shortages, inadequate insurance coverage, stigma, and bias within the medical community. Unfortunately, many socioeconomic groups are unable to access healthcare services due to the high cost. However, leaders in medtech are taking on these challenges by developing innovative solutions that cater to previously unmet needs or markets. These solutions are designed to not only improve health access and equity, but also provide an attractive ROI. And we have just the woman for the job to help distill these stories with these amazing, fabulous panelists. Moderating this panel will be Deshawn Dorsey, Executive Director of AvaMed XL. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks to all of you for hanging around for the last panel of the day. I know that we are the only thing that stands between you all and the reception, so we will hope to make this a good use of your time. And as Lisa was saying, today we're here to really talk about the case for what the return on investment is when you think about better access to health care. And the discussions today have been really thought-provoking, right? We've heard the case for why people need to invest in women's health products. We've heard the case for why research and development of products needs to include diverse perspectives, diverse innovators, diverse researchers and investigators, and most importantly, diverse patients. So now we're going to talk about ROI, and why is that important? When I talk about health equity, a lot of us are aware of the role that health equity plays in improving patients' lives, right? We understand that imperative, but it's not always an easy case. We tend to discuss health equity in the context of a moral and ethical imperative, but we realize 20 years after the publication of Unequal Treatment that we haven't made the level of progress that people would have anticipated. We are still hearing about disparities in health access across conditions, maternal health and morbidity and mortality stats, how populations of color fared during the COVID pandemic. And while many of us understand and support the moral and ethical imperatives, that's not enough for everyone to really latch on to the concept of health equity and to move the work in this space forward. And that leaves for us the business case. Sometimes that is all that's left. As Lisa indicated, my name is Deshawn Dorsey. I run the small business division of AvaMed XL. I'm the executive director there. And I also work on our health equity and women's health equity initiatives alongside my colleague, Deidre Washington, who's out there in the audience. Some of you may have met her. And in 2020, when health equity and social justice issues were top of mind in light of the George Floyd murders, there was a lot of attention placed on what the medical device industry could do to elevate and move these issues forward. And AdvaMed stood up our health equity work stream, and we stood that up around 4 principles that we really use to guide our work to this day, and which I think fit in very nicely with the perspectives that we'll hear from our panelists. Those principles include reducing and eliminating bias in care, because we understand if there is bias, conscious or unconscious, that patients will not get what they need and what they deserve. The other principle focuses on technology awareness and care awareness. So that includes among providers, patients, and caregivers. They're understanding what the full array of treatment options are and making sure that those providers are really making every patient aware of the full range of options, not the options that they think that patient might be comfortable with, but really leveling the playing field and making sure that everyone has equal access to the same care and technologies. The third prong being focused on access regardless of insurance status. So we want to make sure that people, and you'll hear a bit about this from Dee Dee later, but we wanted to make sure that patients, regardless of whether or not they have Medicare, private insurance, or Medicaid, are really getting access to the full realm of technologies to help with their conditions, and also work with external stakeholders to make sure that people are able to take advantage of telehealth and remote monitoring and remote access technologies to promote and encourage positive health outcomes. And then lastly, we have a principle focused on clinical research diversity. So that's not only among principal investigators and researchers, but also among the patients who are in the pipeline, who are helping to develop these devices and create the data that will eventually be used when they go through the approval process and ultimately get to market. So I'm really pleased to be joined by our great panelists today. And they are amazing women. They represent a variety of sectors and perspectives. And their journeys in the health equity space and in the healthcare space, I think, will give us all valuable insights into what we as a community can do to move these issues forward. And so please join me in welcoming Mandy Walters, who's the Executive Vice President and Head of Strategic Partnerships at the Hawthorne Effect. YJ who's Senior Vice President, Global Marketing and Transcatheter Heart Valve at Edwards Life Sciences. Marissa Fair, who's the CEO of Her Health EQ and Deep Look Medical. And last but certainly not least, Dee Dee Janice, who's the CEO of the Wonder Guild. And thank you. So let's go ahead and get started. Just quickly, we're going to go down the line, and I want everyone to just tell me about your organization, the work that they do, and what you do in particular.
Hi, I'm Mandy Walters, as she mentioned. I work for Hawthorne Effect. That's my CEO right there. Jody, raise your hand. Jody Aiken. I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. I head up commercial. And at Hawthorne Effect, what we try to do, the clinical trials industry is broken. I think we can all agree on that. There's a patient recruitment problem. There's a site saturation problem. There's a patient access problem. There's a data quality problem. And so what we do to try and solve for this, and also solve for inclusion, not just minority and the underrepresented populations, but those that are socioeconomically not able to participate in trials, we solve for that by bringing the trials into their home. I don't want to say it's like Amazon, but it's close, okay? We go to your homes, or we can partner with retail and go to the clinics and take the clinical trials to where the people live. And that's made such a huge difference in so many of our cases and with our clients, and really starting with COVID, doing that work in a pandemic through Operation Warp Speed and able to reach those patients in their homes. It's huge. It makes a huge difference. And it allows the underrepresented populations to participate in life-changing therapies that they never would have the opportunity to do before.
Great. And YJ?
So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm YJ. I lead global marketing for our transcatheter aortic valve business. Edwards, we are known for leaders being in structural heart, from surgical and transcatheter technologies, as well as critical care. My responsibilities are upstream marketing, which includes design inputs for product development, and it cascades all the way down to disease awareness therapy and downstream marketing. So it's a pleasure to be here and share some of the stories around this health access equity and ROI and how we feel within our TAVR business we can make a difference in that space.
Great. Marissa?
Hi, I'm Marissa Fayer. I play two roles in two different companies. I'm the CEO of both of them. Her Health EQ is a global nonprofit focused on women's health in developing countries. And what we do is we really play into the health equity side of things on a global scale. So we deploy medical equipment focused on non-communicable diseases such as cancers that affect women, heart disease, maternal health, and making sure that in developing countries they have access to this equipment, because we all know that, well, maybe we don't know, but I'm going to tell you that in developing countries, girls don't go to school because they're pulled out first. And the reason that they're pulled out of school first is because their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers unfortunately get sick. I'm in healthcare, so let's fix that problem, making sure that they have the equipment so the girls can stay in school, because they're going to be the ones that change our lives in the future. So I founded the company 7 years ago, so I'm the CEO of Her Health EQ. And then I'm also the CEO of a medical device technology company, a software technology company called Deep Look Medical. And we have one of the first AI-ish kind of technologies called DL Precise that's FDA cleared. And it's one-click measurement, segmentation, and visualization in soft tumor lesions across all imaging modalities. And this is really important because we can see inside dense breast tissue, or dense tissue, specifically dense breasts, lung, liver, disproportionately, obviously, with the breast, but so many others, disproportionately affects women. And also, dense breasts disproportionately affect Black women, Asian women, and Jewish women. So it's a problem because that means you have a 50% greater chance of getting cancer, just because you can't necessarily see what's behind your images. So so I lead both companies. So I'm a mix between the janitor, the admin, the IT administrator, and coming up with some strategy, pitching to investors, and trying to keep the company running. As any small startup in both sides, that's what we do.
Great. And Dee Dee?
So I am happy to be on the hyphen couch here with Marissa.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah.
Because I actually am the CEO of the Wonder Guild, and what we do is we're a speculative design consultancy that focuses on designing products with companies that are investing in emerging and developing markets. And our goal with those companies is, since you're already investing here, why not contribute to solving some of the many challenges they have and do it in a way that is, we call it innately sustainable and equitable, meaning it's not bolt-on. It's something that when we design a product or we design something into your value chain, you'll want to keep doing it because the incentive to do so is attractive. And it won't change when your next regime changes. So that's part of what I do, and I've been doing that since 2000. The other thing, and probably the reason that I'm here on the couch, is because for the last 10 years, I've been able to take on full-time roles, thanks, awesome team, at healthcare companies, specifically health insurance companies, leading health innovation labs where I have been running their health equity programs, their community health programs, their value-based payment programs. And part of my job has been to develop products and services that somehow make the case for why they should make deep investments in health equity-based products and services. Why I'm probably on the couch.
So as you see, the couch is full of brilliant people with brilliant ideas who have made a significant impact already, and we're looking to hear a bit more about how they've done it. So starting with you, Mandy, can you tell us a little bit about Hawthorne Effect and what they're doing to assist companies and why your work is really important in helping to illustrate and help them demonstrate that return on investment?
Sure. I actually have a great example. And so many times, and I think we heard it on the last panel, what's the ROI? What's the ROI? And people want to translate that to something fiduciary, something financial, something tangible that is really hard to do when you're talking about bringing drugs to market. And it does start with the design of the trial, but recently we're actively involved in a trial with Cardiovascular Research Foundation. It's a nonprofit that focuses on cardiovascular diseases. This trial is called the Preview trial. It focuses on the valvular health disease, and it was set up and designed to really evaluate different patient populations from different ethnic and diverse backgrounds to set a baseline. And as I mentioned before, it's really hard to do when you have the same sites being used. A lot of patients not able to get to a site unless you live within 50 miles of a site. There's a good chance you're not going to participate in a clinical trial. Me, I come from the poor South, and very proud of it. But I can tell you right now, none of my family nor my neighbors would participate in a clinical trial because it's scary. It's terrifying. When you say we're going to come into your homes, it's a game changer. It eliminates that barrier. You meet the patients where they are. This trial originally was going to have 100 sites. We were able to eliminate those 100 sites with one virtual site and employ our hero network that's throughout the country to make these visits happen. And the end result was participation from the Black and African American community. 15% of the five, on their way to 5,000 patients enrolled so far, have been Black, when normally less than 5% of African Americans participate in trials. Asian Americans were able to get 5% to date. Less than 1% of Asian Americans normally participate in trials. Hispanics, we're up to 10%. That number is growing. Less than 1% of Hispanics participate in clinical trials. It is a game changer when you can meet the patients, and really, patient journey has been thrown around in this industry forever as a sexy term. Well, now, since COVID, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And it matters to them when you can come bring these life-changing therapies on their terms, meet them where they are, and have them represented. And again, do away from the trial design of 100 sites with one. That's ROI.
Indeed, indeed. And the other offshoot of that is when you have the patients in the studies, then that means that ultimately they can vouch for the product.
Absolutely.
They will tell their family, they will tell their friends. It helps promote long-term access to people participating in clinical research, and it helps people to feel more engaged in that product development and better understand what that product means for them and for their communities.
Absolutely. And then also, it breaks down the stigma of being a guinea pig or, not fully understanding what they're signing up for. And it also, gives the drug companies better quality data on underrepresented populations because, we've all seen it. COVID and the pandemic and all the vaccines were great examples. It was drastically underrepresented minority and diverse patient populations, and we didn't know how it was going to affect because of that underrepresentation during the trials that happened so quickly. Well, now I think it is kicked up and everyone's paying attention. We just have to do something about it, and decentralized trials and remote trials, they've always been sort of a scary thing. I think that Tufts did some research published last year, really taking trials from the last 10 years, phase 2 and 3, and then doing sort of a pro forma, where they said there may be an initial investment up front to make these remote clinical trials happen. But at the end of the day, when they asked the pharmaceutical companies if they had brought those drugs to trial faster, didn't miss the enrollment deadlines, didn't have to exclude sites because they weren't enrolling, there was a 700% return on investment. Oh my God. 700%. I mean, if that doesn't make a difference, I don't know, what else does. And I think we just have to keep hitting the message home. It does start with the patient, but it does put money back into the pockets of the people who are running these trials.
Absolutely. And I know that in the context, Marissa, for instance, your work with Deep Look, one of the things that you've been very conscientious in doing is enrolling a representative population of patients in the hopes that the patients that are really representing this group that's affected disproportionately by dense breast tissue will, ultimately be the beneficiaries and have more knowledge about this care. So you care to speak to your approach at Deep Look in terms of your technology's development?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we've just, so we're FDA cleared, so thankfully we don't have to do a study. But, well, we don't have to do a trial. We're doing a study right now because we want to be able to prove that this works on all populations. So as I said before, Black women disproportionately have dense breasts. So if you don't test it on them, how are you going to know that the technology works? So we went to Emory University, which alone is in a pretty diverse population in Atlanta, but has the largest database that has pulled from all over the country, the largest database of breast mammography. And we created a study with them where we very specifically said 40% white, 40% Black, 10%, 10 to 15% Asian, only because they didn't have as many samples, 10 to 15%, and 5% other, and I hope that adds up to 100. But I'm close, I'm somewhere close in there. But we very specifically said it, and there was no signing any document that didn't have that in there. Because when we go to the companies, when we go to the hospitals, when we speak to our partners, and when we present, and people are like, well, does this really work? Well, yeah, it does. And when we're talking about dense breast tissue, I mean, it's clear. There's a lot of technologies that score it. There's a lot of technologies that are out there that can, show that you have dense breast tissue. We're doing this on a retrospective basis. But what we're showing is that, yeah, we can see inside dense breast tissue regardless of who you are. So we're actually doing the work and the studies. We actually have no idea. It's fully blinded, so we don't know. And we're getting the same results, after, obviously I can say that, but we're getting the same results. And so it's really interesting to be able to say, yeah, we did the work. And how we did the work? We just asked for it. We wrote it that way. And a lot of people say, and I agree, it's really hard with enrollment. And we're doing a retrospective, so it's a little bit different, than a drug trial and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, we wrote that into the design. And that's what we wanted to do. And it's important for us. And we'll continue to do this. And as we're continuing on our product development with our next product, which is a morphology database, we are loading the same type of images to make sure, because eventually we're going to get to what was spoken about kind of all of today, and just in the executive interview before, to say precision medicine is the future. Well, okay, so you're a 60-year-old Black woman from, with this background, with these other health conditions. Well, you know what? Here's 6 other matches of the same exact type of woman, and this is what her cancers look like. So it probably looks like the same, malignancy or not. And so these are the pieces of data and information that have to inform AI and machine learning, and they're based in truth, and you can only do that by getting this data from a diverse population to know where the future is, and be able to have products that are developed for all people. And also, listen, as we continue, we're going to get different sets in there. We're also going to get other areas of the world involved. I mean, this is obviously just the start, but those are the things that we need to load in. We unfortunately didn't have a large Latin population in here. It's something I'm very cognizant of, as I lived in Latin America for many years. So, those are next steps to see, is there a difference? And if there is a difference, can we see it? And let's see what it looks like. And I think we just have to be really cognizant when we're creating these programs and creating these studies and trials. You just have to really ask for it. I know it sounds super simple. I'm not naive. But just write it in accordingly. And if your CRO partner or your study partner won't do it, then go somewhere else. There's plenty of people who want to work with you.
Great. And so we talked about the ROI when you get the clinical trial design right, when you get the study design right. And we also know that after the clinical trial, there's a lot left on that pathway to get to the patients. And a lot of that starts with patient awareness, patient engagement, and actually alerting patients to the access opportunities and what can be done to help resolve their health situation, their health dilemma. So YJ, I know you work in the TAVR space at Edwards, and I know you have some interesting stories about how you all have worked with patients to help build the case for ROI as it relates to aortic stenosis. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit about before COVID and after COVID because it's very salient, and I think you queued it up very nicely with kind of what the social unrest was and the disparities that existed in healthcare because of what COVID brought to life. So for those of you that don't know what TAVR is, it's a minimally invasive way to replace your heart valve. So it's through your femoral artery. I followed my homework. I sat with someone new. I met 6 new people today. Just so you know, I'm a good listener. And one of the lovely ladies I sat at lunch, she said, Edwards, my dad got a TAVR. And I said, you actually know what it is, because when you talk to people, they don't know. And this lovely lady said, my father said it was a miracle. He could not breathe. He couldn't move around. He went into his procedure at 8 a.m., came out of the procedure room at 11, went home the next day, was walking around. So you would think with this technology that was previously solved with open heart surgery, everyone would have access to it. So when we talk about TAVR, we think about the fact that it was made commercial in Europe, over 15 years ago. In the US, it's been made commercial since 2011. You would think the uptake, which is all very true, the uptake of TAVR procedures now exceeds open heart surgery. You would think this would be available to everyone. 2 reasons why. Number 1, we have the NCD, which is a national coverage decision. We talk about reimbursement. Procedures follow the money. The NCD was designed to make sure that the procedure was done safe and effectively. But as a byproduct of that, it eliminates a lot of people from rural communities. So again, your zip code. And again, it's centralized at centers of excellence, which is where probably a lot of people of underserved populations are not close to. So that's one. I think the other thing is really around how do you address these communities? And it's not as simple as putting a picture of diverse patients on a brochure and thinking that people will come. While I don't think it's a bad thing to do that, I will say that we had tried that. So I'm very fortunate to work with incredibly smart people on my team. One of the women that leads this initiative now, Stacia Gardner, she had assessed some of the programs that we had done previously. And what we had done, we thought we had done it the right way. So we had reached out to ABC, which is the Association of Black Cardiologists. We had their support for using them to send out patient education materials. We had a wonderful story of Chief Tate. If you do not know him, he was the first Black chief of police in Selma, Alabama. So if you know the history, that is a very big deal. We had featured him on our website. You would think those 2 proof points alone would bring people in for this incredible procedure. Did not happen. And so as a part of that was, how do I build patient awareness and include underserved populations? So post-COVID, Jamie Wheeler, who leads our clinical trial division, I know, and she's involved with MedtechWomen, has been actively involved in trying to change the clinical trial process for many, many years. So that still has to happen. We need government changes for NCD, so that needs to happen. Those are all parallel paths, but as you know, working in government, it takes a long time. So we were tasked by our boss to say, how do we kickstart healthcare post-COVID and aortic stenosis, which is completely treatable but is a progressive disease, how do we bring people back? How do we get patients activated? So one of the companies that we worked with had an in with the NFL alumni. Football. Okay, so now you're starting to think, how does this all relate? We said, how do we build trust in communities that they look to different people as their source of truth, right? I mean, I was born in Korea, so when I hear my mom talk about where she gets her health information from, it's her friend. So while I am involved and I have all the information, she's like, Mrs. Kim at the church told me I should get this procedure. And I was like, Mom, that is not true. I'm her daughter, but she goes to Mrs. Kim from the church, right? So if you look at that analogy, and I'm sure you have, right? Yes, churches, choirs, you name it, right?
Facebook is
yes.
too.
And so when we were tasked with this, we had a partner that said, hey, you know what? If your child is trying to reach these underserved populations, my only connection is I used to play in the NFL. Not when it was, not the money that they're making now, but way back when, because again, we serve people over the age of 65. And we said, let's try something different. So in partnership with Jamie and her team, Jamie developed a clinical trial, observational trial that said, hey, how do we bring people in to show data on how heart disease impacts people of underserved populations? And we said, look, this is kind of a tricky situation. If we say it's only for Black people or Hispanics, we're going to get yelled at. If we say it's only for white people, we're going to get yelled at. How do we make it inclusive and make sure that we get the right patient population? So Jamie created this amazing clinical trial detail. I'll say that it was a screening event so that we were able to bring in NFL alum, their family members, their spouse that would meet the target audience, and as a proportion, get more people of color. We said, okay, how do we deal with the issue of trust? Because as we know, there's a long history of people trying to come into clinical trials when they're in a very sterile situation. So we said, we're going to make this a fun event and make it about getting together and reuniting. So we went to where the different alumni associations were willing to work with us. So we traveled to 9 places in fancy hotels. We set up clinical screening rooms to do an echo and EKG. We had soft music. We had nice flowers. We had physicians come pro bono to talk about the heart disease. We had patient education team. We had the clinical team. And we invested a day. So it started with sitting in the room, arms crossed, like, who are these people talking to me about something that I don't even know what this is about. But I came because I'm going to see my buddy that I haven't seen in a few years. To the end of the day where it was so much trust. They said, if you need me to talk to anybody about this, I'm happy to. So over that course, it's about building trust because like my mom, she's going to listen to Mrs. Kim, not me. So if there are people that they can reach in their community and just even share a little bit of heart health information, how fantastic is that? And then the third part of that was really beneficial was we thought, hey, we're getting data because data is going to move the needle. So fast forward a couple months, and we said, okay, we're pat ourselves on the back. We're a good company. We did all this stuff. People should be coming. And no one did. And we said, how do we build an investment that makes sense? Because this has to be a sustainable model. So fortunately, I have a team that looks after health access equity as a part of it, of patient engagement. So the task was, how do we bring awareness of TAVR? And at the same time, can we do something that is a unique need of people and populations of that need diversity? So I'll fast forward. We hired this wonderful person named Dr. Cedric Cravens, and his son was doing an internship in the LA Rams. So he heard about our study and said, you guys are actually invested. You actually did this. You spent all this money. We said, yeah, but we can't find a partner to make it broader. And so he said, well, my son works at the LA Rams. And so we all know with women, we're all very direct. We sat down, Cedric, and said, can we get in there? We would love to talk to him a little bit about what we want to do. And so to make a very long story short, I think the LA Rams looked at us and said, you just want your name everywhere in the stadium. You can buy all of this with Edwards here, there, and everywhere. And we said, no. That's not what we're about. We want a message getting out about heart health, about being 65 and older, about the inequities of healthcare, and that they can make a difference, and they can go to these different resources. And we want to work with your alumni association so that they can be champions in the community. And so we were able to come up with a partnership that they have community events. They reach out to young players and their grandparents in Inglewood and Compton. We're very excited about going where they are to share the information. But number 2, from a business standpoint, buying media. So for those who's in the commercial end of medtech? Okay, so we're in the minority a little bit here, but buying media, buying placements is expensive. And so I'm always having to justify the ROI just on the basic part of doing business and advertising patient education. What the Rams brought to this was they were able to get me 10x the value because they have a bigger platform than what we do as Edwards. And they were willing to give us their media buys and their platform to not talk about Edwards. That wasn't our goal, but was to talk about heart health and getting off the sidelines. And so as a result of that, the investment in the day-to-day business of bringing patient education out, we were able to actually address the issue, which is building trust in a much more bespoke way. And we have other partners in our community that we work with outside of the Rams, but some others that address the need of outreach, which we would have to do anyways. But we do it in a way that builds trust, and we try to build it in a way that makes it sustaining. And that's how we're able to raise all ships and all boats. And that's the goal and the plan that we want to have within our patient education and focusing on health access equity.
Great. So we clearly have heard what trust means in terms of building that willingness on the part of patients to seek out certain types of care and to be comfortable in that type of care. We also know, and I think this was brought out a little bit in the last panel when one of the speakers mentioned the immortal Henrietta Lacks. And I think one of the longstanding issues that we hear about is trust, and people of color, underrepresented patient populations do not trust the medical system, and that's why they don't get care. But I believe the reverse of that. I believe that people have informed these opinions about trust based on their experiences with the healthcare system and with the providers. And so from that standpoint, and anyone's free to answer this, what efforts have been taken to reach out to the provider community so that they are on the same side facilitating and growing that trust relationship with patients?
We're looking at you,
I know,
Dee
we're
Dee,
all
on that
looking
one
at you.
first.
We're all looking at me because, well, I'll tell you, one of the last roles that I had in health insurance was as the vice president of the Health Transformation Lab at Blue Shield. And one of the things that we did do with providers was, and they had a network 70,000 providers strong, was reach out to them to first understand what their thinking was around health equity. Okay, you'll be happy to know they're for it. But in terms of what to do about it, though, I think that was the more interesting challenge. Like if I heard anyone else say they were colorblind, I was going to harm myself. So one of the things we did do was, after finding those champions amongst the physicians, was kind of what you did, right? Get the physicians to talk to one another and talk about what they were doing. But then the other one was designing with AHIP a program around health equity and around anti-racism so that the doctors who wanted to could take advantage of that training. And a lot of it really was about asking yourself those questions about who gains an outsized benefit and who has an outsized disparity based on whatever practice you undertake. And then what are you doing because you're assuming something about the person you're treating versus doing because science has borne this out, right? And it was super basic. And honestly, I think just in the times that we spent with doctors, I think the really interesting thing that we learned was a lot of what they did or didn't do boiled down to time and energy that they had left over to do it. And then also, as someone talked about it earlier, about training, right? What you learn as a doctor, and you spent all those years learning it, sort of unlearning it a little is difficult. And so we didn't approach them that way. We didn't look for an army of the good. We looked for an army of the willing. And I think that's what we all have to do.
Yeah. And Dee Dee, while you're talking, I know that, you know, your insurance background, right? We talk about insurance and we talk about health equity, and we almost automatically gravitate towards, well, if patients go in, they're being seen earlier, they'll have better outcomes, that saves the system money, win-win. But if you're an insurance company, that's not necessarily a win-win. More access, more utilization means increased costs for a patient base that might turn over and may not necessarily stay with your plan for an extended period of time. So, Dee Dee, as you've worked with insurance companies, like, how have you made the case for why they should be engaged in health equity, given that it's not as easy a case to make for like improved access and referring a friend and, you know, Miss Kim at church now referring the procedure? Like, what approach have you taken?
Well, so I want to say one thing. When I went on into the insurance side of this, and I went in thinking they're going to have the best data, and that's going to be the place where I'm going to be able to make a data-based, evidence-based case for health equity, right? I tried it all the ways. Insurance and healthcare had been my client when I was in advertising. They've been clients when I was doing marketing and just, you know, marketing health plans and open enrollment and that bit. And so I went in there, and I have to tell you, like, the ba-dum-bump at the end of this story a decade later is there actually is not a mathematical equation that I could come up with that would demonstrate that an insurance company should invest in health equity. I'm gonna let that sit for a second with you. If you think about it, like literally there was no math. And I had to get myself, like, I needed like help to get off the floor to go back to work the next day. But there is no math that makes sense for an insurance company to invest in health equity, because we talk about this almighty data. Well, the data that they have says the people who are disabled, people who are sick, people who are Black, people who are Hispanic farm workers, you are risk. That is what the data says. You are expensive risk that I would rather minimize, and I'd rather minimize your utilization. And so one of the first things that we found with my team was when we were putting together these health equity programs, we were so excited and happy for ourselves that we got all of these people vaccinated. You talked about COVID, we did a vaccination run, we got 65,000 Californians vaccinated, all of them in the Black and Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, Alaskan populations vaccinated. We're so excited with ourselves. But then when we looked at the per patient cost on that, and then we went one further, we looked at our members. Those members, they actually had no utilization before that, none. And so now, while we were happy with our per patient cost, that it was under $100, that seemed like something we could do. But when you realize those patients had used nothing heretofore and were still paying their premiums, then now your case sucks. Right? Because now you just increase utilization. You didn't cut costs. And then on your point about churn, the other thing you realize is we want to talk about, like Hafisa talked about, I would love to be able to say, you know what, invest in pediatric care because it's like pre-adult preventative care. But then they're like, you know what, adults don't stay on my plan long enough to invest in them deeply. And certainly when the trajectory kind of looks like this, and then it doesn't start looking like this or like this for decades, right? Or maybe at least 5 years. Every 18 months, you're not on my plan anymore. And so there isn't an easy case to make. So sorry, I just want to take the air out of that balloon. But I will say we did make the case. And one of the things that I had to do in order to make the case was turn down easy funding. Before we were getting money from foundation, we were getting money from the CEO's special budgets, right? And I had to say, okay, keep that 30 million, keep that 50 million. I'm going to compete against your other programs. I'm going to compete against your other products and services for dollars. And I'm going to win. And the reason I'm going to win is because one of the things that we realized when we were designing programs around the quadruple aim, which, by the way, does not include health equity, right? When we were designing those programs, I realized, hell, I don't care what I just made in the name of health equity. It's better than any of the stuff that we're marketing to other people, right? Don't you want care brought to your home? Don't you want care by somebody who cares about you, or at least has the good sense to behave as if they do in the moment you need them to, right? Like, don't you want care that you can afford and doesn't make you choose between rent and survival? Like, who doesn't want this? And so what I did was, and this is to the panel title, was why don't we improve access and lower costs, but in a way that not just the people who aren't being served well want it, but everybody else wants it too. And that was how I was going to compete. Right now, health equity is largely being driven forward for payers by mandates and penalties. Fear. I don't know about you, but I mean, I might have made my best run because of fear, but that's about the only thing I've done best out of fear, right? And so, that was kind of what we started with, penalties and mandates, and then we went on to, hey, I'm going to make you a program that's going to increase, and it was mundane at first, increase the access points by 3 additional access points for every patient in a community that we don't serve well now. I'm also going to lower your cost by 30%, and I'm going to get you money faster, like revenue. Revenue off of health equity programs, we only talked about cost savings theretofore. But the way we were going to generate revenue was basically that we were going to be selling something that not just the people that we were underserving wanted, but that everybody wanted, everybody in that market, so that you could grow high 7-figure income in a fairly short time for insurance. They obviously wanted it yesterday, but after 3 years, you can serve 2 million people and make, over $30 million. We like you a lot. We like health equity much. And that's the kind of thing I think you have to really try to figure out how to do in whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just built a little bit on what Dee Dee was saying. So when you talk about revenue, so I'll talk about TAVR and how equity can play a part in a different way of looking at ROI. So in our very efficient hospitals, TAVR actually is very profitable. Cardiology is very profitable. The challenge coming out of COVID is the apathy for doing more or getting back into it. So that's one part. But there are lots of hospitals that want to do it. Part two of this health access equity is that we have physicians that are deeply passionate about serving this population base. And we're different in the sense that our procedure is Medicare, so there's not an issue with insurance for the most part. So there is money that's already attributed to patients that have AS. It's a matter of getting them in, and if you run them efficiently, you make money. So it's a win-win business case. I think the ROI that I like to factor in that we talk to physicians about is if you have a physician champion, the ROI being them engaged to representing the hospital. Most hospitals have some sort of diversity metric of some kind. Maybe not obviously with the insurance side, but at least on a scorecard, hospitals have that. What are you doing for D&I initiatives? Getting a physician, we use that as number one, you need a physician champion regardless of whatever program you have. You have a profitable procedure like TAVR has for cardiology. And now we have a way of talking about health access equity that these physicians that we partner with do outreach into the community. And I think those are ways of engagement, and our field staff and our staff at Edwards that are involved knowing that they're impacting patients builds an equity of less turnover. You know, they are more engaged in their work. They drive engagement. And those are things that I think while we look at as not directly involved with the business ROI, those have ROI benefits that still hit the bottom line when we look at a P&L.
Absolutely. And one thing we haven't touched upon, and I know was a hot topic in some of the prior panels, was ROI as it relates to investment in diverse-led and diverse-founded companies. And we know that those companies struggle to get investment. But Marissa, just putting on your investor hat for a minute, can you talk a little bit about the ROI for really supporting diverse-led and diverse-founded companies?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's actually not enough data because it hasn't been for a while that there's a lot of investment into women or diverse founders. I mean, a lot of us know the stat. It's less than 3%. It varies from 1.5 to 3% of venture capital goes into women. It is 0.5% into Black women. So it's just egregious. It's horrible. I can't even talk about it because we're almost at the end, and I want to be positive. But I want I want everyone to come out here excited. But it's horrible, and it's exactly what was. Joyce said this before. The fact of the matter is, and it was spoken about at the other panel. Like as CL was talking about it, as a woman that is speaking to investors, I have to answer 45 questions. It's an angel, These are angels. These are early investments. And if I have to answer 45 questions to every single investor, how are any of us supposed to do our job? And listen, I'm also an investor. I have a third hat of a partner at a venture fund. And we should be investing in women, investing in diverse founders, because that's where all of this health equity is going to come from. And it's not going to come, no offense to the white men in the room, it's not going to come from white men. That's what it's been. Again, sorry, no offense. But, there's 3 of you in here, I know that. And finally, a conference of all women, it's great. But there's a lot of new ideas out there. And also, let's be clear, most of them are in women's health, an area that is not invested in. Everyone's like, oh, it keeps growing year over year. Well, it's awesome that it keeps growing from 0. We grow to 0 to 1%, and then we double. Oh my God, that's great. It's still we're still at 2, 3, 4%. And so, there's nowhere to go but up. So, investing in women and diverse founders and different people, they're different ideas. We're going to have different medical devices, different pharmaceutical formulations. We're going to have different ideas that are coming up. I mean, orthopedics hasn't been invested in, or nothing's changed. And it's because there weren't women in the design room to know that the orthopedic surgeons that are women cannot grip the handles because their hands are smaller. It's not that they're not strong enough. Their hands are physically smaller. It is literally just how we're made. So, I mean, having those people in the room and having those people coming up with new devices, creating medical devices, and for women, for things that we experience every day, that's what needs to be invested in, because we are all, at this point, demanding it. And let's be clear, 100% of the women in this room are going to have menopause, are going to go through it. It's literally just happens.
I'm not doing it.
No. I mean, fine, tell me your trick, because I want to know. I want to know, because I'm starting, and now it's probably, that's why I'm sweating, but, it's fine. So 100% of us are going to go through menopause. It's not a disease. It just literally is life. So, where is all of that? I mean, we were talking about earlier in the day, talking about maternal health. I mean, there really needs to be more innovation. And then we talk about it on a global scale. It's completely different what's going to happen in Manhattan of New York on the Upper West Side versus what's potentially going to happen in, I don't know, a rural community in Latin America. They just don't have the same access. So investing in different solutions, investing in diverse people, that's where your new ideas are going to come from. And there is absolutely not a single stat that shows that investing in women and diverse teams gives you a worse ROI. It actually gives you a better ROI. So, I mean, every stat is up there. I think it's something like 75%. I'm going to quote this wrong, and this is I'm sure my menopause brain. But, it's good, lots of good skin cream, but I'm a little older than I think. But it's more when you invest in these diverse teams with at least one woman, they perform something like 20, 30, 40% better. And again, it's the end of the day, I'm looking forward to cocktails. But that's where the investment has to go into. And then just to bring it back to ROI, I know the cancer space really well. But when the cost for cancer care, if you have cancer, especially breast cancer, the average is $133,000 is spent from insurance companies. Let's hope you have insurance and you don't have to pay for that out of pocket. When you find it at stage 0 or 1 or right in the beginning of 1, the cost is actually $25,000, but it's $500,000 when you find it at stage 4. So how about the insurance companies, and I'm not putting this on you, I promise. You're not in it anymore. But how about the insurance company invest in things that are for women and for health and health equity, because it's actually in the long run going to save them money. And it's the nearsightedness of immediate returns versus, actually in a few years this is really going to save us money. And again, I hate to be disparate, but it's men making these decisions. And they don't see it, and it's I don't see a problem. Well, it's because you're not looking, and you don't have the right people in the room.
So I guess, to try to end this on a happier note.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Like I said, and we have a few seconds here before we can get a few audience questions because I know people are holding them. But, we're 20 years out from unequal treatment, right? And in another 20 years, so 40 years out from unequal treatment, 20 years from now, if you had your way, 20 years from now, health equity would be what? Starting with you, Mandy.
A non-issue, not even discussed because we've fixed it.
YJ.
Thing of the past.
Marissa.
Literally stole my answer. So I hope we never have to talk about it again. And no offense to the conference organizers, I hope we don't have to have a conference for it.
We're here for it too.
Yeah.
Dee.
A well-worn path to designing beautiful, useful, effective things for people who look like all of us.
Beautiful,
was
useful,
really
effective
eloquent.
things.
That
I love that.
She wins.
Yeah, you win.
That was eloquent.
Yeah, you win.
And so questions?
You answered that.
Oh, for me? I love Dee Dee's take on this. We talked about it during the prep. But for me, it would be something that would just be part of the evolution of every health product. So it would just be built into the process. All right. And I'm going to stop and take a few questions before we thank our lovely panelists. And I think I saw a hand over there.
Hi. So 40% of births in the U.S. are on Medicaid. And I was wondering if you have any experience or strategies for new medical technologies seeking Medicaid coverage.
Can I So my team, when I was at Shield, one of the best things we did was build out the medical benefit, the birth equity medical benefit to support our moms on our Medicaid plans from the prenatal period, from when they found out they were pregnant all the way until they were 3 months old. And it was meant to be 360 supports, mental, financial, and medical, physical medicine. So it was a very interesting piece, because also what you find is what we built in the pilot was too expensive to put onto Medicaid. But what I would say to people, and I was talking about this at lunch, is most of the time, most of the people here are going to design for what is covered, right? And you're going to try and stretch to fit what can be covered. But realize in terms of the health insurance industry, they are, one, they're deeper pockets, but two, they are trying to minimize what is covered, right? And so anything that outstrips that amount usually either means the people you intended to get it won't get it, or it means that the people you intended to get it will get it, and they'll get a giant bill that they can't pay, and they'll be bankrupt. So what I would suggest to people is, one of the things that I learned by working outside the country with my company most of the time is we focus on filling out what insurers will pay. We focus on filling up what you can swipe onto your credit card versus thinking about the possibilities of building $1 billion business on $6 a month or $6 a year that your customer can pay, which is very much the perspective when you're working in Africa or South America or Asia, right? And I recognize there are more people, but there's a world between coming up with a procedure that's going to cost $60,000 or a piece of medical equipment that's going to cost $30,000 and coming up with something that I can get for $6, right? Live in the world between, make for the world in between, because it's going to make our world better. For sure. Great.
Any more questions? Oh, yep, over there and then here.
I guess, thank you for the wonderful panel. The healthcare access leading to attractive ROI, great topic and great thoughts here. Segueing, when we look at unmet clinical needs and looking at conditions, disease areas and conditions that impact people that are less represented, the ROI doesn't look attractive. The piece of the pie doesn't look as big. So any thoughts about how do we address unmet clinical needs that are systemically impacting people that have less access?
I would just be quick and say we're not sure that it actually is. It's impacting, it's probably impacting a greater population, and that study hasn't been done. So, there's very few diseases that are impacting like this teeny tiny little segment. It's probably larger, and nobody's talking about it because people don't know about it, and especially when we talk about women, there hasn't been enough studies to know who has this, why they have it. Is it a certain nationality, a certain, area, ethnicity? We probably don't know, and it's probably a larger area than anybody thinks, but the calculations are done on a very small population. So unfortunately, I actually think there's probably a much larger ROI than there actually is. And that's why we need more information, and we need more data, and we need more diverse populations to actually get this information. So it's not like a real answer, I'm sorry, but I think it's talking about, it's this segment plus all of this that we don't know.
Can I sorry, I'm gonna be that person.
All right, please do.
I'm gonna just say that we have to stop assuming when we are talking about people that we don't serve well, people who are underserved, that we are all poor.
Agreed.
We are not.
Agreed.
And so there is, in a lot of cases, an ROI for selling to well-heeled Black and brown people.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Just want to
for
throw
sure. No,
that
I for
in.
sure agree.
Yeah, I want to tag on that too, because I think that the need, whether it's a chronic disease or it's a rare disease, an orphan disease where there's a much smaller patient population that's affected, your question was about patient access. We have to eliminate the blockage to that. You know, we have to give patients access, which means we have to go to them. So, and you know, to your point, it again, it doesn't have to be someone that is, you know, socioeconomically disadvantaged. It could just be, like, again, if they don't live near, you know, a clinical trial site within 2 hours, or they don't even live near, you know, wherever they can get access, we have to go to them. That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
That's what has to start.
One of the things that was mentioned early on was differentials in access to care between different types of insurance. And I know last year there was a report by the OIG on the differential rates of denials for care under traditional Medicare versus Medicare Advantage plans. So Medicare Advantage is denying care for medically necessary services that are covered by NCDs at something like 6 times the rate that Medicare than traditional Medicare. Then additionally, there was a ProPublica report recently that only, I think, like 1% of denials of coverage are ever appealed. And for anybody who's ever worked on like the patient advocacy or health benefits side, it's a nightmare trying to appeal something. My first internship in college, we took a case to the Supreme Court to get autism services paid for a little boy. Wow. It's an absolute nightmare. Do you feel that as innovators and as companies that are bringing these technologies to the market, we have an onus to take some of that on, whether that's working to, you know, create standardized approaches to insurance denials, whether it's to create greater accountability for those Medicare Advantage plans and for other plans to ensure equity in at least like denial rates across the system, and what would that look like?
Do anybody want to take a stab at that? I'll take a stab as the policy wonk. So I worked in AdvaMed's payment department for about 15 years before I started doing this job, and then spent many years at another place and at the IG's office once upon a time litigating cases. And what I will say is this. So Medicare Advantage, right, is its own animal. It just has to cover what regular Medicare will cover. That does not span the entire breadth of possible technologies that can be utilized in treating that condition. It just has to cover something that Medicare will cover. But when you speak to, you know, what the role for healthcare manufacturers, what the role for insurance is, I think that in recent comment opportunities that have come out of agencies like CMS, there's been a lot of talk about how you infuse equity into Medicare Advantage, into Medicare and Medicaid. And I think that, you know, this is going to continue to be observed and acted on in the context probably of quality measure development. So I think people at some point get dinged for their quality scores. There's been a lot of attention paid on how people who are Medicare Advantage plans are getting their information. I think that as people are getting clearer, better information, or have a better understanding of how the plans work, there may be more demands placed upon those plans in order to retain their enrollees. But I think all of this starts with everyone engaging in advocacy opportunities. So AdvaMed, of course, engages in advocacy on behalf of our members. All of the individual medical device companies, as well as other interested stakeholders, are always able to comment and weigh in on these issues. But I think it starts with that advocacy, so like the patient organizations that you work with to get those autism benefits. Because I think a lot of it is about, to my much earlier point, awareness. And people not always fully understanding what they're entitled to and what you might give away when you get that free gym membership with your insurance plan. And Dee Dee, I don't know if you want to weigh in, or YJ.
The one thing I was going to add is know the game that the insurance companies are playing. And I don't mean this in a negative way necessarily, but I mean, if you're going to jump into the court, right, like know if like a rock or a ball's coming your way. And so like when I think about that, right, they care about stars when you're talking about Medicare, and on Medicaid, they care about the reimbursements, but they also care about all of the penalties and the regulatory bits, right? And so understanding what game they're playing, and then, you know, applying pressure to the points that matter, right? If I get stars, I can enroll all year, like 5 stars, right? And then, so let's like rob them of 1.5 stars, and then they care, right? And then I think the other piece that I would say on this is back to my piece again. design it for the lowest possible cost you can. And if you get a chance, make a premium. But you're going to have to design it low enough so that it can fit into the Medicaid benefit and then make sure that the companies can make a profit, right? We're not going to get away from people are doing this for money.
The thing that I would say on from an industry standpoint is, what does your innovation provide to society? So the more data that you can provide on the actual cost effectiveness of what your technology is doing for the system, which obviously for our technology, it's all Medicare, so it's provided by the government. So we look at our technology and said, you know what, from a quality measurement, it is better than current standard, which is surgery. So we're very fortunate that our department, JHR, generates that data on a continual basis to have these discussions. And we have some insurance, Medicare Advantage, some scenarios that do come up that get to be addressed. But the most recent data shows, and the generation of data, to build a little bit on what you were saying, is when we look specifically at, for example, at TAVR versus surgery. We have a publication that just came out last year, Dr. Leaf, and the actual title is called The Social Impact of Disseminating TAVR, and said, with the advent of TAVR as a technology, patient voice, how much more are you willing to spend to live longer? So from the patient voice, it came out to $150,000 more is the value of one life that TAVR can make a difference. And so when you then, that doesn't factor in quality of life, it doesn't factor in the caregiver impact that individual will have in their community or their network or their family unit. And so the study showed for CMS and for government, and again, it's more data, but different from patient, based on fact, based on outcomes, that from 2010 to 2040, if we factor in everyone that has this disease and had access to TAVR, it would save the system $115 billion.
Oh my God.
So that's ROI.
Yep.
But you have to continue to drive it, and it has to be based on clinical outcomes and really using the measurements and the studies that all payers, or CMS has used to measure it. It's easy to get stopped because there are a lot of roadblocks along the way, but I think you can't at some point argue with the facts. And as far as patient advocacy groups, the best patient advocacy group is you. So I'm going to challenge everyone in this room, because you make up the 1% of probably the 1%. And I've had multiple conversations over lunch about, can you imagine shepherding, like if you weren't in this industry, how would you get care? So I would ask each of you to start with your friend network. You're my NFL alumni in my world. You can influence someone in your world by the things that you've learned in the conference, by the things that you've heard. And that would be the best way that I think you can make a difference personally, is a direct patient advocacy impact.
Great. Thank you all.